We take the most intense source material, all the research, the notes, the insights, and we just cut straight to the core knowledge you need.
And today, we're going after something huge.
We really are. We're challenging what might be the biggest, most exhausting assumption in modern life. This idea that constant happiness is, our default setting.
It's a complete shift in perspective. And if you're listening and you experience that constant low-grade hum of anxiety, that feeling that something is always just a little bit wrong.
Which is most of us, right?
It's most of us. And we're here to argue, based on the material we've got, that this is not a sign that you're failing. It's actually proof that your brain is functioning perfectly.
Perfectly. I love that.
Yeah.
So the premise we're unpacking today is, it's pretty provocative. Humans are not biologically designed for happiness. We're designed strictly for survival.
Right.
And our mission here is to understand why our inherited biology sets us up for this constant chaos, and then, and this is the crucial part, how we can acquire the only weapon powerful enough to fight back.
A weapon which our sources define as philosophy.
Exactly.
So we'll explore 5 key arguments, kind of moving from our genetic programming and this terrifying burden of freedom all the way through to the mechanics of seizing back control.
And becoming what the source material actually calls the god of your own reality.
It's a bold claim.
It is. So let's start right there with the biology of chaos. Because the sources, they lay out this compelling, almost funny evolutionary reason for why every single one of us is at least a little bit neurotic.
It really just boils down to a simple, pretty brutal selection process. If you think about our earliest ancestors, right? They hear a rustle in the tall grass.
Okay.
They've got 2 ways to interpret that sound, 2 options.
Option A, the optimist.
Yeah.
The early adopter of positive thinking.
Exactly. They think, oh, that's probably just a gentle breeze or, maybe a cute bunny.
And option B.
Option B is the pessimist, the original paranoid survivor. They interpret that rustle as immediate death threat, run, hide, attack.
So what happened to the optimists?
They became tiger bait very quickly. They didn't survive long enough to pass on their easygoing, blissed-out genes.
So we are, genetically speaking, the descendants of the most high-strung, hyper-vigilant cowards in human history.
We are. The people who assumed everything was a threat were the only ones who lived to reproduce. That's whose genes we have.
Which means we inherited a 247 disaster alarm system. And, that was fantastic for the savannah, but it is utterly disastrous for navigating the 21st century.
That's the whole problem. Our brain doesn't have a context filter for threat level. That ancient, really powerful survival mechanism that protected us from the saber-toothed cat, it still runs on the same factory settings today.
So if I get a slightly passive-aggressive email from my boss, or my bank account dips below a certain, arbitrary number, or I send a text and it just gets left on read for 2 hours.
Your brain is activating the exact same chemical cocktail as if that tiger were lunging at your throat. It translates these trivial modern stressors into existential threats.
So our ancient biology interprets the modern world, emails, deadlines, social media, as basically one continuous low-level death camp.
That's how the sources put it, and they make it brutally clear. Your genes simply do not care about your happiness.
Not at all.
They only care that you continue breathing long enough to reproduce. This genetic code, it's not interested in bliss. It's interested in perpetuation. Survival is the only metric that matters.
Okay, and this brings us to what feels like the central human dilemma, which is where the philosophy really comes in.
It is. We have this biology just screaming, danger, control, survive. And at the same time, we're burdened with this massive, terrifying freedom.
Okay, hold on. If anxiety is purely a survival feature, how do the sources reconcile that intense genetic programming with the idea of radical free will? Isn't that a huge contradiction?
It is the defining contradiction of being human, and it's why we suffer.
Okay.
Just look at an animal for contrast. A lion in the wild. It's born perfect. It doesn't question its existence. It has a pre-installed operating system called instinct.
Right. It knows how to hunt, how to mate, where to sleep. It doesn't need to choose a career path or wonder if its life has purpose.
Zero anxiety. Its life is completely dictated by its nature. It just follows the code.
But humans?
We are born as hardware without an OS. That's the analogy. Our instincts have faded almost completely. We don't automatically know where to live, what to believe, or how to love.
We're just left with this huge amount of computing power, a high-performance engine of desire, but no instruction manual.
And that lack of an instruction manual, it creates this terrifying, paralyzing void. We're constantly sitting in like a Ferrari without a steering wheel or a map.
The engine is roaring. Our desires, our ambition, our ability to think is immense, but there's just no direction. No external guidance system.
And in that moment, the core existential question just pops up, the one that causes all the panic. How should I live?
And because we have no natural instinctual answer, we are forced to choose every single moment.
That massive responsibility is what the sources label the root of human insanity.
So what you're saying is that freedom, the very thing we fetishize and say we want more of, is actually experienced by the unprepared is hell.
Exactly. It's not a blessing. It's an unbearable burden of infinite choice.
It is. And the most common human reaction to an unbearable burden is to escape it.
Which brings us to the third big argument, the rise of what the source calls the voluntary slave.
Right. You're just trying to escape the pain of thinking, the agony of choosing, the exhaustion of being the sole author of your life. I mean, that is exhausting work.
Yeah.
And it's painful when you get it wrong.
It is. The sources are very clear. To escape that profound existential void, that pressure of absolute freedom, most people choose the comfort of obeying over the sheer agony of thinking for themselves.
They become voluntary slaves, or in modern terms, NPCs, non-player characters.
And this isn't just about conforming. It's about actively, though often unconsciously, handing over the steering wheel of your life. And there are so many ways we do this.
We just delegate the responsibility for our choices.
We do. Some people hide behind fatalism. They say, whatever happens is God's plan or it's fate's will, and that removes them from the moral responsibility of their own failure.
And others.
Others hide behind the biggest algorithms of all, trends in society.
Okay, let's get concrete here. What does hiding behind a social algorithm actually look like today?
It's defining your worth purely by external, borrowed metrics. It's taking a job not because it aligns with your internal values, but because of the status or the income it gets you.
Or following a rigid diet or exercise trend just because some influencer posted it, without listening to what your own body's data is telling you.
Exactly. Or defining milestones. I should be married by 30, I should own a house by 35, I should drive this car.
All because those are borrowed lines of code. They're dictated by external validation. You're just running on someone else's algorithm.
That is the life of the NPC. You're mimicking behaviors, reacting to external things, and executing code written by others, whether that code comes from Hollywood or your parents or the dominant social media trend.
And this brings us back powerfully to your anxiety. If you're anxious right now, the source material offers a shockingly simple reason. And it isn't the lack of money or time or success.
The anxiety is a direct result of the fact that someone else is holding the steering wheel of your life.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, think about it. Passengers are always anxious.
Always.
If you are not in control of the vehicle, you are fundamentally dependent on the wisdom or the stupidity of the driver. You don't know if they're going to steer you safely to your destination or just right off a cliff.
And that feeling of dependency, the realization that your entire path is determined by external chaotic forces you didn't define, that is the constant underlying root of modern anxiety. It's a loss of self-sovereignty.
Okay, so if the problem is genetically programmed anxiety and our default coping mechanism is to surrender our freedom and become a voluntary slave, what is the weapon? How do we take the steering wheel back?
The material points to one clear answer: philosophy.
And we have to be clear, this is not philosophy as an academic subject you study in a classroom.
Not at all. It is defined as the power of interpretation. This is the crucial leap. The world throws raw, random data at you. Pain, trauma, setbacks, confusion. You cannot control that data.
But you retain the power to process it. That is your admin privilege. The ability to edit, to recreate, and to assign meaning to the random stuff that happens to you, but on your own terms.
Let's use the specific, brutal example the sources provide: bankruptcy. Imagine you are facing $2 million in debt. That is an objective, devastating fact.
Right. So the voluntary slave, the person with no philosophy, they look at that raw data and they immediately process it through borrowed code, society's code.
And society says, you are a failure, you are doomed. Their internal monologue interprets the event as, I am worthless, I have failed everyone, God hates me.
And that interpretation, it converts the objective fact of bankruptcy into a complete personal catastrophe.
Which often leads, predictably, to self-destruction, addiction, or just deep depression. They see themselves as a victim.
But the master, the person armed with their own philosophy, looks at the exact same event and applies a totally different interpretive standard. They see the $2 million debt as merely data.
Their philosophy might say that the highest human value is resilience or learning or self-mastery. They don't deny the pain of it, but they refuse to accept the external interpretation of failure.
Instead, their internal monologue is something like, this is rare, this is painful, but is unique R&D, it's research and development data.
I've been given a rare chance to experience the absolute bottom, and that pain can now be used as fuel to become a monster.
And not in a negative sense, but to become a force of nature, driven by the wisdom you can only gain from profound loss.
The event is identical. The reality they occupy afterward is fundamentally chemically different.
This is the difference between simply reacting to stimuli, which is what animals do, and using your own defined standards to digest stimuli for growth, which is exclusively a human superpower.
Reacting is for the beast, interpreting is for the sovereign. And this brings us to the final, really practical application of this, establishing your own legislature.
Okay, what does that mean?
If you feel adrift, if you are anxious, it's a sign that you haven't enacted your own laws of right and wrong, of success and failure. You're still, as the source says, stealing laws from Instagram feeds.
We have to be specific here. What does a personal law actually look like? This is where the rubber meets the road for anyone listening.
A law is a standard that applies regardless of external conditions. It's internal sovereignty. For example, a personal law might be, I will not engage in gossip or character assassination no matter what the perceived social benefit is.
Or, I define success not by the outcome of a project, but by the integrity and the maximum effort I applied to it.
You are creating your internal moral and ethical constitution.
Exactly.
When you live without philosophy, your life is described as drifting. Every wave, every critical comment, every market dip, every unexpected bill is a terror that threatens to flip your little boat over.
Because you have no fixed internal compass. You're just reacting to everything.
What a life with a self-established legislature, a life with philosophy is navigating. You cut through the waves because you know exactly where you're going and, more importantly, how you will respond to the turbulence.
So even a devastating event, even a typhoon, becomes nothing more than powerful high-speed wind for your sails.
Because your internal laws dictate that you must use all available forces to advance, regardless of how uncomfortable it is.
So the sources really present this whole thing as a binary choice. You can live as a slave to your instincts, to the opinions of the outside world, and to random data.
Or you can embrace that terrifying freedom, that void, and become the god of your own chosen reality.
And that moment you are armed with your own philosophy, your own established set of interpretive standards, is the moment you become what the source calls a true sovereign.
You reclaim the steering wheel, and you begin the vital work of building your own internal map.
So we've covered this whole central arc, from understanding why anxiety is biological programming, through accepting the profound burden of radical freedom, and then finally seizing that admin privilege of interpretation.
That power to define your own standards, that's where all personal power actually resides.
And this raises, I think, a really important question for you to consider. If freedom is hell for the unprepared, and personal law is the foundation of sovereignty, what small, immediate law could you enact right now?
Just a tiny, non-negotiable personal standard of right and wrong.
To begin building your own personal legislature and take that first step from being a passenger to being a true sovereign.
That choice of definition, that single moment of self-enactment, that's the only way forward.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into why philosophy isn't just a classroom exercise, but the essential blueprint for survival in a chaotic world. We'll see you next time.